Welcome back, listeners and viewers of the Cryonics Underground podcast. It's been a while. As you can see, I am not currently joined by Daniel. Instead, I am joined by the fabulous, wonderful, often on the Cryonics Underground podcast guest co-host, Nikki Olson. You'll remember her from the Cryonics Alarm, which she has worked on and we talked about back in episode 12. And as a guest co-host, when we did our episode with Robin Hansen, that would be episode 20. Just for fun, we'll link those down below. She's here today to talk with me about the recently launched Great Cryonics Survey of 2022, which will be the subject of our today relatively short episode. We're going to start with a talk that I gave on the survey in Zurich just recently. And we're going to play that talk so you can watch it or listen to it as you as makes sense for you in your current format. And then Nikki and I will come back and talk about it and give you all the juicy little bits that didn't go over in Zurich right after this.
Okay, well, I will power through this, see if we can help us get back on track. But I think this could be one of the most important non-scientific research projects, we could say, of recent times in cryonics. And incidentally, since David was talking about AI, that was not chiseled by me, but of course chiseled by an AI called Midjourney. There we go. So, as many of you know, I'm part of a podcast called the Cryonics Underground with Daniel, who is here in the audience. And I also started a Discord server, which is the, I would say, preeminent Cryonics server of our times. And I have had a chance with both of these to meet virtually and speak with a lot of people in the cryonics community. Obviously, with the Cryonics Underground, I've had great conversations with a lot of the kind of who's who in cryonics, many of which are in this audience. And on the cryosphere, I've had a chance to speak with a lot of people who many of us may not know, but are cryonicists, are members, or are what we call the Cryocurious or the Cryocrastinators, or people who are interested in the subject. And through these conversations on the Cryonics Underground and through the cryosphere, I have come to learn a number of interesting things about the kind of people who call themselves cryonicists. And some of these discoveries are, for example, that a large portion of cryonicists seem to be perfectly okay with mind uploading and the scenarios which lead to mind uploading, such as neuro is typically thought of to lead more likely to that. While a substantial number of cryonicists find this to be a terrible idea, would not want to be uploaded, or if they are uploaded, don't feel that the person who is uploaded or run in a simulation or run in some other substrate is them in a meaningful way that they value and that matters. There are also a number of people who I've met who claim that the reason that they're into cryonics is because of an underlying fear of death, an anxiety that they had around death that they've had through their lives, some of which I know are in this audience. And it is because of this fear of death that they thought about cryonics, they searched cryonics, and indeed they became cryonicists to quell that fear, to quiet it down, to assuage that fear of death. However, for many other cryonicists, I would put myself in this latter camp, they are signed up because of the sense of adventure, the sense of what about all those enormous questions we're going to get a chance to answer in the distant future that we're not anywhere near being able to answer right now. Of course, you know, if the singularity happens next year, well, that's different. But you know, for the rest of us, we see this distant future when really interesting things can happen, and there's much to explore that we couldn't possibly explore today. And that's what drives us to be interested in cryonics. However, the interesting thing is these different camps from what I've gathered, tend to think that the opposite camp is silly, crazy, doesn't exist in large numbers, or that they're sort of like superstitious and supernaturalists, you know. So like a prominent member of the mind uploading camp, I would say, is someone we had on the podcast called Robin Hanson. And the impression I got from speaking to him privately was not that he wouldn't, of course, he would be perfectly happy with everybody knowing this, but that if you think mind uploading is, you know, is not really you or something, you're just like some confused supernaturalist. So the people in these different camps really don't have a good understanding that that there are these other camps of people, and that perhaps they are more numerous in the cryonics space than they realize. In fact, some of the people who have an anxiety or a fear of death have told me that this whole thing about wanting to be a cryonicist for a sense of adventure is just a smokescreen, is just my way of hiding my deep inbuilt anxiety and fear of death. This is how I'm coping with it, because of course the real thing that's driving me towards cryonics is of course an anxiety and a fear of death. So you can imagine that it's kind of a complicated situation that I've kind of discovered. Okay. There's also, I've noticed, a number of groups that seem to be overrepresented among cryonicists. Engineers and programmers, I think many of you have noticed this. Rationalists, there's a sort of subset of people. There's substantially more men involved in this. Many people in the, especially different places that I've interacted with them, seem to be somewhere on the autism spectrum. And that's not disparaging in any way. I think, you know, that's sort of a superpower that I don't have, but they are somewhere on the autism spectrum. And the truth is, there's also, of course, politically different groups are overrepresented, and cryonicists tend to have, as far as I can tell, fewer children. But the point of all this is, these are all speculations, right? I assumed certain things about how many people are engineers and programmers, how many might be on the autism spectrum, etc., based on my own interactions with people, anecdotes, stories, etc. There has not yet, or certainly not recently, been any kind of comprehensive investigation into these questions about the cryonics community. So, what are some other potential questions that we don't have good answers to? How many people are in favor of neuro versus whole body? Obviously, if you sign up for neuro, even though you have the money to afford whole body, that means you probably think it's a good idea. But is that because they are also mind uploaders, which seems to be more popular among neuro, or just because of the financial costs of it? We all speak to them, we might have some ideas, but again, no real study has been done to try and ascertain these questions in any formal sense. What about people's journeys to become a cryonicist? Obviously, Tomorrow Biostasis and the other CSOs have an interest in understanding this, to understand how better to outreach to them, but we have not had a systematic look at this. Why are Cryocurious and Cryocrastinators still Cryocurious and Cryocrastinators? We might hear from many of the ones that do transition into becoming cryonicists, but we don't hear about the ones very much that have not yet transitioned into becoming cryonicists. What about the cryopreservation of pets? There are many people who think that that's ridiculous, bad PR, silly, gives the cryonics a bad name, and there are many people who think it is actually the gateway into making cryonics a much broader and more important endeavor than it is today. Our attitudes towards risk. So is a person who has a great worry about death and their fear of death, is that also correlated with their attitudes towards financial risk and personal risk and health risk? We just don't know. There's so many interesting questions about the cryonics community that really seem to divide us, and we are in the dark about a lot of these things. So, the goal here in what I am launching today, the Cryonics Survey of 2022, is firstly to help the CSOs improve their own outreach, so that is, reduce wasted efforts, and be able to reach those people more effectively. So if you understand, for example, that there tend to be 4 large categories of people who become cryonicists, A, B, C, and D, and you can very quickly ascertain whether a person who is expressing some interest is in camp C, you know how to better approach them than if you are sort of not sure, and you sort of talk about this and you talk about that, and you don't realize that the reason that they're trying to become cryonicists is because they have an anxiety and a fear of death, that's different than somebody who's doing it because they are looking for adventure in the future and would be marketed to differently. So, of course, this survey goes well beyond just understanding that. We want to get an idea of what do existing members think about their cryonic service organization, how well is it doing, what can it do differently, how can it improve, and of course, hopefully, someday offer different services based on a better understanding of what cryonicists believe, and of course, what they want. The philosophical frameworks that underpin their ideas. I think a lot of people who dismiss these questions are short-sighted, and I think this survey will, well, it'll either prove me right or wrong to some extent. So, without too much further ado, I want to encourage everybody watching, everybody in the audience, to at some point go to this link, bit.ly, Cryosurvey 2022, or you can scan the QR code and take the survey. Now, it is not a short survey. It is comprehensive, so make sure you have a good, cup of tea or whatever it is that you're going to enjoy. Now, all of the results of this survey, of course, when you take the survey, your own responses will not be tied specifically to you. We don't ask you your name. We don't ask you a membership ID or anything like that. But any information that is published on this survey will be published in aggregate, and we will be putting together a comprehensive analysis of the survey, including looking for things such as correlations that might be interesting between different groups who are taking the survey. Now, the survey is not only for cryonicists. We would also love to get a lot of responses from the cryocurious, the cryo-interested, the cryocrastinators, somebody who finds it really worth discussing and worth thinking about, because it's useful to understand and have data from the difference between these two groups. So if you can understand why is it that some people went from being cryocurious to being cryonicists, and other people who have not yet made the leap, maybe there's some distinction that we can find in the survey that helps us explain this unusual fact pattern. So, that said, I would love to open the floor for questions, comments, or cheap shots.
And welcome back. I have a few questions for you, Max. Is that okay?
I love questions. I hope everybody loves questions. That will mean that more people take the survey.
Okay, I'll start with this one then. So I'm curious, what sparked your decision to do this survey? Was there any particular event or experience where you're just like, I must do a cryonics survey?
Well, I mean, I mentioned a little bit about this in Zurich, but there have been so many conversations that I've had with people here on the Discord server that we're both a part of, and that I've seen on Reddit, and I've seen in other forums and other places. I remember actually I had posted about this in Reddit in the past, and I kind of said, look, it seems to me that cryonicists fall into this camp and this camp, and it seems that there's like a divide on this issue. I think I posted about that with regards to the uploading matter, and that it also seems like we're into the following things, and we have the following psychological beliefs and not these other ones, and then this is sort of what 80 to 90% of cryonicists fall into these camps. But it always irked me that I was just kind of saying this stuff anecdotally, and that we care about good data and good evidence, and we know how easy it is to bias ourselves and think that we believe something based on just a few anecdotes, when in reality there's so much more hiding behind the curtain that we don't really see or understand. And I said, somebody should solve this. Somebody should actually try to do a full comprehensive survey of cryonicists to really understand these things, to understand where they're coming from, how their beliefs, what their beliefs are, how they might have formulated those beliefs, and from there be able to inform a lot of other things that we hope to then base our efforts on, whether it's marketing or how to design the right kind of product lineup people like product lineup. What does that even mean in cryonics? Well, like, do you, for example, do you offer brain cryopreservation or do you not? Should you think about offering neuro or should you not? Should you focus more on better or different structures of life insurance, working with different structures of life insurance, or should you focus more on some other financial structures? And that's going to be based on, well, how financially able are or secure are is the average cryonicist or the average one who wants to become a cryonicist. Or, there's so many of these questions that we almost don't know which questions we should be asking because we just don't have a good understanding of what the group of people are who want to be cryonicists or who already have become cryonicists. So that was a lot of the impetus behind creating this survey. And like so many other things that I've worked on in this space, it was a lot of, hey, there's this thing that should exist. It doesn't exist. Why doesn't it exist? Somebody should go do it. No, okay, nobody's doing it. All right, I'll do it. There's a number of things that have been kind of like that.
I know a little bit about that feeling.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. With the Cryonics alarm.
Yeah. Yeah, this kind of brings me to my next question that I had for you. Has there been any kind of survey in the past of Cryonics members or potential Cryonicists? Anything like this widespread or with this many questions?
So listeners, now viewers, will know that we spoke to Chris Gillette in an earlier episode, one of the earlier episodes of the podcast. And Chris had been commissioned by Tomorrow Biostasis to do a survey of internet users and their thoughts and opinions on cryonics and things related to cryonics. And so that was a great survey, but it's clearly different than what this is. So this is a survey specifically of existing cryonicists or the cryocurious, people who are looking into it, thinking about it, think it's interesting, but maybe haven't signed up, versus like, what is the average user on the internet in the US or in Germany? As I recall, that was how he phrased it. What do they believe about this stuff? So two different types of surveys, but the fact that, there have been surveys in the cryonics, done by the cryonics industry or that involve cryonics, I think is a good sign. And a lot of great ideas came from Chris's survey. So I hope a lot of good, useful stuff comes from this one. Other than that, I heard that there was some other survey of cryonicists done like years and years and years ago. Maybe it was the 80s or 90s or something by one of the orgs. Yeah. I think that's pretty outdated, and I couldn't even find a copy of that, but not particularly useful or relevant today. And I guess some of the surveys I think there was a survey by like the Less Wrong community or such that related to cryonics. But again, it wasn't like super targeted on this stuff and didn't ask all the questions that I think are most relevant for the marketing and product fit and demographic understandings that I hope that we all now will have access to as a result of these efforts.
Yeah, so you're hoping you don't just want to like survey people who are already signed up for cryonics necessarily, but you mentioned you wanted to survey the Cryocurious. And so are you trying to like think of different ways we could be marketing to try and capture those people that haven't already signed up?
Yeah, that's part of it. So the Cryocurious or Cryocrastinators, Cryocurious, and the goal here is to figure out what are the differences between a Cryocurious and a Cryocrastinator that suggest some avenues to explore as to how different industries or the different companies could turn those Cryocurious and Cryocrastinators into full-fledged members. So I think maybe the more we understand that, for example, it could be that the big difference between these two groups is financial or age or the things that the kind of social media that they engage in, or it could be something else entirely. But we ask a sufficient number of different questions that I think we'll be able to get at a good, at least preliminary answer to that question. Because of course, if somebody could answer, we don't really know, right? But like, how many more people out there are cryocurious or cryocrastinators and sort of haven't shown up, they haven't gone far enough to like make their way to calling one of the orgs or showing up on our Discord server or whatever. But they are cryocurious or cryocrastinating. So how many of them are there? I don't know. But if we had a much better way of being able to target those individuals and say, hey, here, let's actually help you take the steps to become a full-fledged cryonicist, that could be big. And it's worth exploring that to potentially get at that significant group of people.
Yeah, so we just need more data. I think you're just gathering good data, like a lot of data within the community. But how will you be analyzing the data? Do you have any plans of, do you have a background in statistics, or what's going to the data?
I have some background in statistics, but there have been a couple of people who've also kind of heard about this and stepped up from the cryonics community who are like properly working with data all day, every day, including one person that well. And with their help, we'll be able to see a lot more interesting stuff than SurveyMonkey would be able to show me, or that I would be able to come up with by using Excel spreadsheets and graphs. So so to me, some of the perhaps more interesting data is going to be like correlating different things. Is it the case that people who are cryonicists and have children and have been signed up for a certain number of years tend to also think about it in a particularly different way than other ones who don't? Are there like different kind of like bubbles within cryonics that one can point to and say, like, here's one cohesive group of people who share the following traits in common. Here's another cohesive group of people that share these other traits in common. And it would be, I think that kind of information would be really useful to us if we manage to find it from the kind of results that we can get from this survey.
Yeah, and also visualizing the results can be helpful as well. I think, I don't remember if Chris Gillette's data had any visual aspect to it. I'll have to go back and check. But
he had some. Yeah, he showed some in his in the paper that he produced on it. But I think, we can, visualizing that data and showing how we can come up with all those cool correlations and everything. Even maybe even having like some sort of, I don't know, like those cool sliders that you can like move around and show, like, if you change this parameter of people in the data, how do other parameters of the data change and all that? That would be pretty cool if we can manage it.
Yeah, I think definitely that should be possible. So one good thing when you have this kind of visualization and you're trying to make certain kinds of abstractions is you have to have quite a few data points. Can you say a bit about how many responses you've had so far and how many people you're looking to take the survey?
Yeah, so so far we've had, since I talked about the survey in Zurich, we've had about 130 responses, and we are looking to get somewhere in the neighborhood. I think the right number to get somewhere in the neighborhood of a few hundred if we can make it to there. And the more the merrier. The more data we get, the better. Whether or not it's data from people who are signed up cryonicists or who are cryocurious or cryocrastinators, there's questions on the survey that kind of bifurcate these two groups, and then we can look at the data later and say, okay, here of the people who took it who are these kinds, and that's already one separate group, namely the people who are not yet cryonicists versus the ones who are. But anyway, my point being, good to have more of both groups. So the more we can have, the better. And the more we can have, the more confidence we can have in the results, especially when we try to make correlations between, different portions of things that we ask on the survey, rather than just having specific percentages of people who answered, A, B, C, D, or E on whatever given question.
That's awesome. And I guess one final question that I have for you is, can you give us just some little piece of information or interesting finding that you've seen so far in the data, just to spark our interest?
Well, one thing that I've always argued is like it really seems that people in the space have like half of the people in the space are interested in mind uploading and believe in like the slice and dice, where you slice a person's brain perfectly enough and then you run a simulation of that brain on a computer somewhere else, etc. That really is you for every way that matters to a person, to that individual. Like, to them, that person simulated on that simulator really is them. And then there's a lot of people who are Cryonicists who do not seem to believe that. So some number of Cryonicists think that that's absolutely the case, and others really don't. That's been anecdotally what seems to be the case so far. And interestingly, even though we only have 130 results, it's really looking like it's like divided in the middle. Like we're like really like cutting the half of Cryonicists are mind uploader, aficionados all the way, and half of them are not, which is really interesting because I think it clarifies a lot of confusion that people have had in this space, where they think that everybody thinks about this like they do, and they are very wrong. Literally half of people do not in this space, which most I don't know if we'll see how many results we get similar to that, but yeah, that to me is so far one of the interesting results. So if folks want to see even more stuff like that,
yeah,
they should definitely go and participate in the survey themselves. Tell others about it, spread the word, and again, anybody, whether they're just sort of interested in cryonics. I don't think we want to get people who are like completely dismissive of it, because frankly that would not be very useful data. But people who are at least interested in it, find it appealing, or find it worth talking about, should take it. Of course, everybody who signed up should also take it.
So what you're saying, Max, then, is that people should immediately drop what they're doing and follow the link and take the survey.
If you're listening to this while driving, don't literally like stop holding the steering wheel. Pull over and then open your phone or your computer, even better. If you're in front of a desktop, it's going to be easier, but open your phone, desktop, whatever, side of the road. Everybody, we all know you have a cell connection, and get to bit.ly, bit.ly/cryosurvey 2022. Hit enter and take the survey. It'll, of course, also be linked to down below, in whatever format you're watching this. Just look into the description and you'll find the link there as well. Take the survey, tell your friends to take the survey, and within, I would say, probably sometime Q1 of next year, we will be able to have enough results that we will do the analysis, and the analysis will show up. Of course, it'll be open to the public and to everybody to check it out. Anonymized, nobody's specific individual data, of course, will be accessible. But the survey will be accessible. The survey results will be accessible in that research forum to anybody and everybody in the community who wants to check it out and see what conclusions they can draw from it. So yeah, go and take the survey. It is great, and you will feel all the better for having been one with the team and taken it in this case. So take the survey and let us know what you think. And Nikki, if you have any other questions.
That's it for today. I'm looking forward to coming back maybe and discussing the results with you.
Cool. And we will have you back on for that. And of course, in other appearances, wonderful guest host of the Cryonics Underground podcast, Daniel is okay as well. He will be back soon enough. And we'll see you all in the next full episode. Until then.